serious matter. On the 31st of May this year, Miss Justice Phelan granted that I was wrongfully imprisoned for over 30 days. Granted that I was wrongfully under a reduction of liberty as a result of a civil order which she quashed. So that was a wrongful 2-year reduction of liberty, acknowledged by a judge of the High Court of Ireland. A month in prison, which was also wrongful, and this was decided by, again, Miss Justice Phelan. So Justice Phelan failed in her constitutional duty towards me to grant restitution for 1 month imprisonment and 2 years reduction of liberty under threat of imprisonment. I was told I couldn't speak in public for 2 years on the basis of an unlawful civil order, which was then quashed by the High Court. So now we have a judge who acknowledges that a man was wrongfully imprisoned for a month and wrongfully under a civil order for 2 years, preventing him from speaking under duress of imprisonment, threat of imprisonment. And Justice Phelan failed to grant any restitution. Zero, absolutely zero restitution. No compensation, no monetary compensation, no order to vindicate the good name of, nothing to restore the property rights of, nothing, no restitution was ordered by that judge. That is further harm to me. That is further harm by the state of Ireland. It is further removal of my rights on top of the month imprisonment and on top of the 2 years reduction of liberty in the form of not being able to speak. So here we have the High Court of Ireland admitting themselves that I was imprisoned for a month unlawfully, had a reduction of liberty for 2 years unlawfully, and then failing to make restitution. So now we have the High Court of Ireland confessing a crime, effectively, because when you say this person was wrongfully imprisoned and you don't go about restitution and compensation, you commit a crime. You're actually furthering the harm of the person you claim was harmed by being the judge who rules that and then doesn't make restitution. So here we have a judge of the High Court joining hands with those she ruled treated me unlawfully by failing to order restitution. She's actually furthering the harm, further reducing my rights, further harming me, which requires further restitution. So Miss Justice Phelan has committed a crime because it's her duty. She's constitutionally bound to make restitution where she sees an injustice done and hasn't gone about it at all, which is to effectively incriminate herself. And then the Court of Appeal also failed to mention restitution at all. None. The only thing that the Court of Appeal offered was €150 for the court costs. €150 for the court costs and no restitution. Now they're conspiring together to commit these felonies. It's out of control. So we have to call our judiciary into order. If they rule that a man was imprisoned for 30 days unlawfully and was under a huge reduction of liberties, not being allowed to speak for as long as 2 years, I don't know how you would calculate restitution or monetary compensation for that, given that in the UK, 24 hours of wrongful imprisonment is £6,000 of restitution. of compensation. So what's 30 days in prison at £6,000? That's 180 grand pounds. So if Ireland was to have a reasonable equivalent, I'd probably be due north of 200,000 just for the imprisonment. Well, how would you even begin to calculate the monetary compensation that would be due for 2 years of not being allowed to speak? Or you'd be put in prison when the judge rules that that was totally unlawful. They're actually constitutionally obligated and lawfully bound to make compensation and restitution to me. And it's not my job to seek it. It's their job to motion for it, because they're the ones who identified the injustice. So once they become aware of that, they're now lawfully bound to actually go about motioning to make that restitution. So now, effectively, we have Miss Justice Siobhan Phelan further harming my life after she recognises that I was imprisoned for north of a month for wrongfully and did nothing about compensation or restitution. So she's knowingly further harming me. Because it wouldn't be acceptable that you would think that a judge of the High Court wouldn't know that she's supposed to make restitution or compensate somebody who's wrongfully imprisoned. That would be absolutely ridiculous. So she knows, she must know what she's doing. So it's not acceptable conduct. And it actually implies that there's some kind of degree of conspiratorial behaviour going on, conspiratorial action, because it wouldn't be reasonable or acceptable that a judge at High Court level wouldn't know she needs to motion to compensate this person who she's ruled has been imprisoned wrongfully for 30 days. That wouldn't be acceptable in any country in the world. Why would it be acceptable in Ireland? As close as just over the water there in the UK, it's £6,000 per day for wrongful imprisonment. I was in there for 30 of them. So I mean, guys, it's gotten to the stage of ridiculous crimes being committed in our High Court against me. Absolutely blatant, overt and ridiculous crimes. And if it's against my rights, it's against your rights. So what they do is basically, it's like a relay. Oh yeah, they harmed you. Can you imagine somebody saying, oh yeah, this man physically assaulted that other man and that was wrong, it was against the law. Court dismissed. Oh yeah, this man robbed the bank. He shouldn't have done that, that was against the law. Court dismissed. It's effectively what the judge did. She said, this man was wrongfully imprisoned. We harmed his life as the state. Court dismissed. All they said was, okay, we're not going to throw you in jail. You're not going to throw me in jail unlawfully on top of throwing me in jail unlawfully. Oh, why golly, thanks. No, that's not how it works. If you break the law, you have to pay for it. The state broke the law, and the judge said, court dismissed. No, that's not how it works. There has to be compensation and restitution where the state has inflicted an injustice on a party, namely myself in this case. But on anybody, any reduction of liberty wrongfully has to be compensated for. That's the law in Ireland. And when they don't do that, they break it. So Miss Justice Siobhan Phelan on the 31st of May in Stephen Talon versus the DPP failed, number one, to make restitution and compensation for the harm that she acknowledged had been done to me by the state, and also abandoned the testing of the constitutionality of the Criminal Justice Act 2006, committing two crimes. It was incumbent upon that court, that High Court session, to search out and test sections 115 and 117 of the constitutionalities of the Criminal Justice Act 2006 and the constitutionality of those sections. It was number one on the schedule, and they abandoned the test, giving no reason as to why. And that was only the start of the crimes that were committed in that court case. They then went on to say this Mr. Phelan was wrongfully imprisoned, and this Mr. Phelan was wrongfully placed under basically a gag order. He couldn't speak in public. His liberties were reduced to the point of basically being mute, and if he spoke, we were going to throw him in prison. She acknowledged that both of these harms had been done. 30 days in prison and the 2 years reduced liberties. That the state wrongfully imposed them on me and made no compensation and no restitution order. Crime number one. Crime number two was failing to complete the testing of the constitutionality of the sections under which they first tried to implement those harms against me. So if you acknowledge under these sections, these two crimes were committed by the state against this man in the reduction and removal of liberty, well, let's not test them. Let's abandon them, rather. What? You have just ruled that this man was unlawfully treated as a result of the sections that this court was brought together to test, and you think it's a good idea to abandon that test? Are you okay? Is there something going on with you? It's absolutely unheard of and outlandish that a high court that has acknowledged that a test should be carried out of the constitutionality of something would abandon it for no reason and not tell anybody why they made that decision. We just didn't do it. It's like bringing your car to a mechanic. Will you test the car? Yeah, I'm testing the car. I didn't test the car. You're testing the car, you didn't test the car? What are we to think about this? It's like, this car broke down on your way to the shop, so we're going to abandon the testing of the engine of it. That's what that's the equivalent of. This man was wrongfully imprisoned as a result of these sections, so we're not going to test whether they're lawful or not. We'll abandon it. What? Have you lost your mind? Have you gone mad? High Court? You just ruled that this man was unlawfully imprisoned by the state and unlawfully had his freedom of speech removed for 2 years, and you want to abandon the testing of the sections under which that was affected? Your car broke down on the way to the shop. So that checking of the engine we had planned, we're going to abandon that. Mechanic, are you okay? Yeah, your car broke down, so we're not going to check the engine. What? Are you serious? Yeah, you were imprisoned wrongfully under these sections that we're now not going to test. That's what you're dealing with. These are criminals. It wouldn't be acceptable that they would overlook that. It's too fundamental. Like, that's criminal action being carried out by the High Court. They're protecting their buddies and trying to do more harm to me. So now we have a judge of the High Court abandoning the testing of the constitutionality of sections that she ruled a person was wrongfully imprisoned under, while she's not offering any compensation or restitution to the person that was thrown in prison for 30 days, even though he didn't do anything to deserve it. So she's breaking the law on 2 counts, and it's absolutely treasonous. It's out of control. And Miss Justice Phelan has broken the law and runs the risk of treason. Seriously, it's serious what she's doing. Very serious. And up until this point, I was not mentioning any names. And I brought it to their attention. I said, this has to be done. This has to be done. I've been out in public talking to, you might as well be talking to the wall. So now I'm calling it to your attention. 31st of May, 2022, Miss Justice Phelan carried out what I have mentioned in this video. I believe it to be a conspiratorial treason because it's not reasonable or fundamentally logical or acceptable procedurally what she did. She broke the law. She committed a very serious crime and placed her head on the block, in my opinion. So it would be very advisable for her to quickly clean up her mess. Very advisable for her to quickly clean this mess up and complete the task that was set before her court. Test the constitutionality of sections 115 and 117 of the Criminal Justice Act 2006, or she runs the risk of being held in contempt of court, in contempt of the Irish Constitution, and committing treason in our land. Because it's not acceptable that she would be so inept that she wouldn't know that she has to compensate somebody who was wrongfully imprisoned and wrongfully told they can't speak for 2 years under threat of imprisonment, and all of the rigmarole and the dragging it out and the years in court and the cost of that and the time spent, and not think this man was put through all of this unlawfully and illegally. This is harm done to his life by the state, and she didn't even think to compensate when it's her constitutional duty to do so, to vindicate the rights of the person, to compensate, to restore the property rights of the individual. My time is worth money. It's worth money. It's actually worth physical money. And do they think that they can waste it like this and not make restitution? Then they must like the inside of a prison cell. Because treason in Ireland is punishable by a lifetime imprisonment. If we're not playing for small chips here. This is very serious matter. Very serious. I don't think they understand. They're now committing conspiratorial treason. Yes, this man was harmed and we should test the constitutionality of those sections. Number 1 on the schedule was test the constitutionality of section 115 and 117. Then the judge says under section 115 and 117, Mr. Talon was wrongfully imprisoned and wrongfully had his liberties removed. Mr. Talon had wrongfully had his liberties removed. But let's abandon the test of those sections. My car broke down. Oh, we had planned to test the engine. Let's abandon that test. What? You have something malfunctioning and you think that's the good time to abandon testing it? That's the opposites. That's mad. Somebody who would do that would clearly be deliberately doing it, because it wouldn't be rational or reasonable to expect that somebody educated to that level and that standard would not know that that was absolutely ridiculous and mad. So we have Miss Justice Phelan, in my informed opinion and belief, committing willful crime against our state and the rights of the Irish person, and failing to do a test and complete a test that was brought before the High Court of Ireland to be tested, even though she finds that injustice was done under them. She has committed treason in our state, and she needs to very quickly take this video very seriously and this matter very seriously and clean up this mess quick. Blessings in Jesus' name.